I might have to delete and redo the Nadam video.
If you want to know if someone is enlightened or not, it will show up physically. You start to see light come off the person.
You're saying that people that are enlightened are actually radiating with light. So you're saying there's a level above rainbow body to your knowledge?
Yes.
What is that called to your knowledge?
We call it white light body, basically.
To your knowledge, like how many quote unquote immortals do you think are there on Earth, or are there any? I mean,
Max said something interesting when he said about the eyes, because when someone goes through a certain period of practice, their eyes do change. I had changes in my eyes, as a matter of fact.
What is the difference between Nigong and Nadan?
Is they like to use Negong as a precursor to Nadan.
What in your definition, in very simple terms, what is pre-heaven Qi?
If you look at post-heaven Qi and pre-heaven Qi, there's a lot of different ways you could describe them. And it's interesting that if you look at the Mopai, when John Chang talked about what was in his system, he spoke about the yin and the yang only being black and white. Because what he was referring to was that the yin and the yang were no longer polluted.
I recall you saying something like chakras and dantians are actually in different dimensions.
I know other Hindu traditions that have the models of the dantian.
I don't know what they're called, but some type of pill they take, I heard, in order to emit Qi.
I'm not sure if I'm crossing the line talking about this now.
Isn't there something called so there's Nigong, and isn't there the opposite of that is what Wei Dan? Dawn has been lost in Taoism.
In my opinion, I mean, from any tradition I've ever been exposed to, it's been lost. Like, I'm really at the edge of what I can say when I say this now, but they involve things like the ingestion of mercury and other things as well. These are not simple like animal parts and herbs and
obviously, my audience will be mad at me if I don't talk about Fa Qi.
Every time you do a Fa Qi, it takes a little bit of you away.
Possibly a popular Nigong teacher that's possibly connected with Mopai.
Yeah, there's a stage basically where there's like a manifestation. And this is what I said to you earlier about light manifest. I mean, you heard what Damo said in that interview about light manifesting, and this light appears around people and it hits them with a type of a lightning. And I want to be really blunt. I really don't mean to be dogmatic about this, but that is not Kundalini.
Told me about a story of a guy who can like push people and like stuck into a tree and stuff. I'm gonna end there, not gonna spread any more rumors, but just made me really humble me to understand like this is some serious stuff. All right, guys. So today we are back with the hidden underground Nadan practitioner known as P, and Mr. P's video. I can't go into detail why I had to delete that video, but I had to delete it. But no worries, guys. He unfortunately can't reveal his face, but he's with us today, and he is going to answer more questions for us today. And the thing is, guys, this guy's knowledge is like very, very underground stuff, and it's just he's literally, when it comes to the underground world of Qi work, I mean, this guy is the most knowledgeable guy that I ever came across, and just the knowledge this guy has is insane. And so you know how this industry goes, when you're an underground person, you kind of have to stay hidden. And so unfortunately, we can't be revealing his face any longer, but he is kind enough to answer some questions. So he is back with us today. So let's just get straight into it, P.
Yeah.
So P, we were talking about this, there are some people that are answering questions about enlightenment, that are like, expressing their own opinions about like enlightenment and rainbow body and things of that nature. You personally believe that there's some misconceptions about enlightenment within the spiritual industry as a whole. Could you go into that a little bit? What is enlightenment in your definition, and what are some general misconceptions that are out there in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, We can definitely talk about that. I mean, first and foremost, we should probably talk about where enlightenment sits on the kind of the path, if you would, because it's not really. It's more of it's more towards the end of the path. It's not the end according to the what we say the alchemical tantric traditions, if you would. So normally you go through a process of realization, then there's awakening, then enlightenment, and then following that immortality. And those things are quite well laid out, for example, in the Taoist tradition. But where enlightenment would sit in the Taoist tradition, for example, would be at the stage of a Genren, all right, or what's called a true man. But what's more important really is what comes along with enlightenment, and this is the big thing that people really, really miss. When concepts travel from the east to the west, a lot gets lost in translation. Fortunately, we have some traditions that are still preserved. They might be quite well hidden, but they're still preserved. But literally and quite frankly, what enlightenment actually is exactly as the word speaks. It means to be engulfed with light. So really and truly, if you want to know if someone is enlightened or not, it will show up physically. It is not something that is simply conceptual. It is not something that is abstract. It is not something that is basically in the mind. It will show up on the physical body. And the way it starts to manifest is you start to see light come off the person. This is actually shown. If you look back through history, you will see this in every tradition across all texts. You'll see halos of light around people's beds. It is the purity of Shen that radiates off an enlightened being. And it is not an artistic depiction of something that is abstract. It is literal. There is actual light. Now, you probably know this from our conversations offline. I mean, I directed you to a video of one very, very famous Neigong teacher who talked about this light starting to manifest around them at a certain stage of practice. And it was very, very. We'll talk about this again later on in another way, but it was very, very clear to the people around him. It was very, very visible. It can be captured on a camera. It can be seen. It is not something imaginary. I've also shown you a video of me in practice where a kind of a similar phenomenon had occurred. So it's not something that can't be captured. It's not something that can't be measured. It's very, very real. There are other signs on the body too. One of the first signs is that the eyes go through a change as well. It's it's not something that you can see. It's very, very clear, and there's a whole host of other things that happen as well. But I guess the key point that I want to make to people is if someone's enlightened, you should see light. If you don't see light, they're not enlightened. That's point blank period, basically. And the thing about it is, this is where it gets a bit strange. When a person reaches that level, the Shen that radiates off their body, right? It's so pure that it affects people around them. So by simply being in the vicinity of one of these beings, you will go through almost cataclysmic changes in your mind as well. Just by virtue of being within the vicinity, of being in the field of that light, it will start to change you as well. This is why those people have to go into retreat. It is not actually safe for them to be in public. So they're very, very rarely in public until it's under control. They get to a stage where they can control the light coming up. But for a while, it's not controlled. And if we go back to the example of that teacher that I gave you, that had those, it was happening in various places. It was happening on retreats. It was happening in restaurants. It was happening in all manner. He couldn't control it. And you can't be around people when that's happening because it has effects on them too. And that carries a karmic load as well. But I guess to answer your question, the key point is if someone's enlightened, there should be, how would I say it, a manifestation of light that is visible, that can be objectively observed and recorded.
Wow. I mean, a lot of people say like, I'm enlightened, or, or I'm trying to achieve enlightenment and stuff. But literally, you're saying that people that are enlightened are actually radiating with light.
They do radiate light. That's true. The other things that come with the altered perception and the altered cognition, they all come too. But what people miss is the fact that if something changes in the mind, it reflects on the body, because the body is a karmic representation of the more subtle fields. They ripple down. Basically, that's how it needs to be understood. If there's a change at the more etheric levels, at the more subtle levels, it ripples down and shows up on the physical body, no matter where it is. There's all even at the early stages of Neigong, when you're opening the channels, when you open the spine and the anxiety disappears, you see it on the spine. The spine is changed. And if it's not changed, I'm sorry, it's not real. It's same with the cosmic orbit. There's several physical representations of that show up on the body that can be objectively measured. With all these things, there's objective measures, and there's tests along the way too.
P, so controversial character, but unfortunately, Mr. Gray passed away. You've spoken to Mr. Gray before, right? I mean, I've spoken to Mr. I mean, obviously interviewed Mr. Gray in the past. Mr. Gray always used to say that, he was very critical of this industry and like of the people that I'm interviewing and stuff. But I remember him saying, don't project energy until you can glow in the light or something like that. And he always, he always talked about enlightenment and stuff. And like I don't think he ever claimed that he was enlightened. But like but when he was talking about, when he was telling me like, hey, don't project energy until you can glow in the light. Like now I'm looking back thinking like, oh, maybe he was being literal,
Yeah, I mean, there's a literal. I mean, the thing is, right? This is the interesting thing. When you get to a certain level of perception, you start to see it before it manifests. So if you're a developed being, for example, you can see the fields and the manifestations of, I suppose, how would you call it, the various subtle vehicles. You can see them before they start to but at later stages they start to manifest further and further. Eventually you get to things like, go up and get to rainbow body, and you see physical manifestations of these things. They're not subtle.
So can I ask you real quick, the rainbow body, if you have the rainbow body, like, can you actually, like, as opposed to light, do you see the rainbow around you or something?
They usually leave. And when they leave in a flash of colors, basically. And what normally happens, that's normally an indication that they're not completely like gone without return, basically. They will be back at some point. The reason why is because you understand how light is. Before light breaks into colors, what color is it? It's white. So when someone disappears when someone disappears with rainbow body, what normally happens is they leave behind fingernails and hairs and little bits like that, or sometimes there's like relics left behind which are crystallized yang qi and stuff like that. And they're signs that the person has not actually finished, I suppose, how would I say that? Finished dealing with everything that they need to do in order to disappear into the white light, which is never coming back. Actually, the rainbow body is the kind of the more fantastic of the two, that looks a bit more, the white light is just gone. It's like a flash of white light and everything disappears.
So if you don't, so sorry to cut you off, but so you're saying there's a level above rainbow body to your knowledge?
Yes, there is.
What is that called to your knowledge?
We call it white light body, basically.
White. P. Offline we spoke about Falun Gong. I don't know whether Falun Gong is like high level or not, but I read their text and they call it the milk white body. Maybe there's something to that. I
would imagine that they could be referring to that. I'm not familiar with Falun Gong. It's one of the few traditions I've never really looked into much, to be honest. But There definitely is a stage beyond the rainbow body, because actually the rainbow body correlates to the jhanas, believe it or not.
Okay, that was going to be one of the questions I was going to ask you today. Is I wanted to ask you about the jhanas. There might be people on this call that are like very new to spirituality. Maybe they're not familiar with the term jhanas. Could you explain real quick what the jhanas are for the newer people real quick? And after that, could you explain exactly the levels of jhanas, and just go into details on like the complexity of the jhanas?
I'll say as much as I can about them. I'm kind of limited because there's a very kind of there's varying public understanding of them, and then there's a rather esoteric understanding of them as well. And I think that some of the like, first we need to determine. Some people talk about soft jhana and hard jhana. Right. Well, definitely soft jhana is not jhana. That's just guaranteed. There's no way it's jhana. It's nothing. They're not even comparable.
Right. But Pete, so like, what is the jhanas for the people that don't know what it is?
We would simply, a very very brief like, if you were to ask a normal Buddhist that's kind of aligned to a certain kind of a hard jhana school, what they would say to you is it's unbroken kind of awareness on an object, like where the attention never falters. You're completely absorbed into that, basically. But the more esoteric understanding of it is, what exactly are you absorbed into? That's what's more important. And that brings us to something very, very interesting, which is, what is the role of one of the main Buddhist practices, which is anapanasati, or mindfulness of breathing, as you know. So you focus on the breathing. So why do we do that? Well, we need to understand the way these things work. You have the physical body, you have the energy body, you have the mental body, and you go back further and further and further to more etheric bodies, right? But what people really don't understand is the bridge between the physical body and the energy body is the breath. All right? It is the most subtle kind of manifestation outside of the energy itself. So it's like the carrier between the two. So a lot of people say that the energy exists at the end of the breath. And normally what you have to do is you give your attention, not intention, attention, to the breath. And as you absorb further and further and further and further into it, it starts to slowly bring your consciousness over towards the energy body. And as you become more and 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 more absorbed into the energy body, you start to become closer to jhana, basically. And eventually you will become completely absorbed into the energy body, and you will come out of this meat suit. And when you do that, there are various manifestations that I probably shouldn't talk about that happen along. Not only should I not talk about them, but if I did, they would prime people anyway, and people might start to imagine them. So I think it's better I don't say what they are. But as you come closer and closer and closer and closer and closer, eventually you will get to touch an experience of jhana. That doesn't mean that you have attained jhana. It means you're about to have an experience of jhana. When somebody attains jhana, it's very, very different. What ends up happening is the focal point of their concentration starts to switch over to that body. So it becomes a permanent part of their awareness all the time. It never leaves. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
And once you get there, you start to move through the more subtle layers until you get to the fourth jhana. Because the fourth jhana is really where this is quite esoteric now, but if you can bear with me for a moment. The fourth jhana is the final form jhana. It's what we call it would basically around where cause and effect start to really, really lie, and where energy can convert to matter, and then in the other direction as well. So it's basically where the transfer from energy into matter and then back can occur. All right. So that's the move between the formless and the form and the formless jhanas. So then after jhana 4, you've got jhanas 5 to 7, and they normally work on the rainbow body. And then you have 8 and 9, which are the light body, the white light body, if you would. So you're moving the whole way back. So the difference between the form and the formless jhanas is, as you move towards the formless jhanas, you're starting to go out of form. You're on the way out. And actually, in my tradition, there are very, very clear terms for those. We call them the loku and the lokuttara. So there are 2 stages. There's a stage prior to that, then there's the loka, and then there's the lokuttara as well. So there's 3, basically, you know?
So within the white stage, the white body stage, there are stages within that as.
I mean, like, you have people that, like, I mean, if someone's coming in at that stage, normally they've been around quite a bit. Like, this is not their first rodeo, I wouldn't think, and like they're at the stage. How much can I say about this now? They can stay in suspended animation for a long time, like almost unbelievable levels of period. Like they can kind of extend their life to. So I don't want to say about how long because it will get too weird, but they can kind of, like, if you've ever heard the stories in the Taoist tradition about the Earth Immortals, where they can keep extending their life to live longer and longer and longer. Yeah, you're kind of talking about a similar thing here, where they can just stay, like, they're constantly working at a different frequency, basically. They're not really here. They have something that tethers them here, but they're not really here most of the time. You know, they're somewhere else doing other things. And there's a term for that as well in our tradition. There's a term for that place that they spend most of their time, you know? It's like, and yeah.
Oh, so go ahead.
No, it's just, and there's a term for, these things are known about, you know, they're not exactly, they're hidden from the public, but within the traditions they are known about, you know.
To your knowledge, you know, like Max Christensen from Kunlun, you know, talked about how he met an immortal with black eyes and things like that. There are various stories out there, rumors, but to your knowledge, like, how many quote unquote immortals do you think are there on Earth, or are there any? I mean, there's probably some, like, probably hidden, right? But it's probably hard to say for you.
I mean, I couldn't give you a figure on how many they are, but what I will say is that if you come into the presence of one, you'll know. It won't be subtle. Like, it will be very, like, these. The best way I can describe it is that, I mean, apart from the physical shine, I mean, the first thing is, you, like, Max said something interesting when he said about the eyes, because when someone goes through a certain period of practice, their eyes do change. I had changes in my eyes, as a matter of fact, when I went through a certain period, and I know that there are further ones along the line as well. So the eyes are where the spirit is housed. So when you're starting to get to a high level, there's quite severe changes that take place there. You know, you can see the light of the purity of Shen in your eyes, you know. But when you come into the contact with these people, it's the best way I can put it is, it speaks to something far deeper in you than you are even aware is there normally at the time, you know. And they will just demonstrate things that are, like, so weird and so unbelievably strange. I mean, I think I sent you a video of another teacher who spoke about being in the presence of someone, and he tried to speak and he couldn't speak. His mouth was closed. He could not talk. He wasn't able to. There was no mechanical. He was not able to speak. It wasn't that he didn't want to. He physically couldn't. And that's the type of pressure and density and energy these people put out. Is just the whole, like, to put it in a nutshell, reality bends around them, basically. You know, have you ever heard those stories, like these? And I know this is a really weird thing to say, but, like, you hear all these stories about where, like, they might have paranormal events have taken place and stuff like that. And there's always this weird magnetism around the place. Same thing. There's just this weird field around these people that completely traps you, and just the strangest things occur within it. So you'd know, like, so it would speak to some part of you.
So when we think about like power spots, or when we think about, sacred places, like Sedona, for instance, that's known as Mount Shasta, these places. So do you think there are possible, like, I hate to use the word ghost immortals, but do you think there's those types of people that are just there?
Yeah, there's a place near me. I probably should have sent you this actually. There's a place near me where you can actually see, the magnetism on the water. It's so strong there. It's bizarre experience to go there. Like it's like you step into another planet, or you step onto another planet, or you're in another time. Or so it's like time has not touched this place. And when you go in there, you can feel the magnetism, and if you have the perception, you can see various beings that tend to hang around those spots. They're very, very strong. They're usually, what I've normally found is a lot of these sacred places are almost called dragon lines in Taoism. So the magnetism there is just so powerful, and you can use that in your practice. Actually, I'm a big, like, there's a whole thing we get into later talking about how the environment interacts with your practice, and why those spots are particularly important for that. I mean, like the one place that I go to, it's about 30 minutes from where I am. The magnetism is literally so strong you can see it on the water. It looks like it looks like there's constant rain there. You can see the fields, like, if you've ever seen a magnetic field, you can see it on the water. And if you any perception at all, it feels very, very strong. And even for the people that don't have perception, they always feel something weird when they go to this place. And it is a religious place too. It's associated with a Catholic saint, believe it or not.
Interesting. I think this is a good place for me to start talking about Nigong and Neidan, perhaps. I want to talk a lot about misconceptions today, because, like, we're talking offline a lot, and, like, I mean, like, we talked a lot about so many misconceptions out there from your perspective. To your knowledge, what is the difference between Nigong and Neidan?
The difference between Nigong and Neidan. Well, for a start, I suppose it depends on how you're using the term. Because Nigong is a very, very it's a strange term. It's kind of used as a catch-all term. Some people use it for martial arts, like Tai Chi Chuan or Bagua Zhang or Jingyi or Liu Bafa. There's a load of different things that they incorporate under Neigong, because it does generate a type of internal power, if you would. And then there's the other people that talk about the Qi work that comes with it, the building of yin and yang Qi in the body and stuff like that. But I would probably use that definition more, the kind of the building of yin and yang Qi, the building of the Lord Antien, and the filling the body with Qi and stuff like that. That's kind of the way I've understood Neigong. When I've ever trained it, that's what I was training. But Neidan is very different. It is, well, for a start anyway, there's a lot of mind work involved in Neidan. But also it's what it works with, because Neigong doesn't really work with pre-heaven Qi, whereas Neidan worked with pre-heaven substances, and that's kind of the basis of. You can't do Neidan if you're not able to. I mean, of course, there's a stage you have to go through the foundations and stuff like that, of course. But what I mean is to actually get the Neidan, to get the pill and all those, you have to be able to contact pre-heaven substances. So it's a far more difficult thing to do. The barrier to entry is a lot higher. It takes a lot of skill to be able to do it. And the methods are quite different. The thing about Neigong is, for a lot of it is quite gross. And when I say gross, what I mean is it's tangible, it's physical. You can do it physically, and you can get quite far, With Neidan, no, you can't. Your mind has to go through a lot of changes. And if you're not really willing to, I mean, I'll just say it bluntly, if you're not willing to get the thing that you've built up, the self, if you're not willing to basically blow that up or kind of, implode it basically and get to what sits behind it, you're not going to have progress. You can't carry the self and not change and progress in it, and because you're working with the constituents that sit behind it. You're working with the alchemical substances to create change. Whereas with Gong, we're just building chi in the body. Now, with Dan, you need a lot of chi as well. But how you build chi in Dan is quite different, actually. So what some people like to do is they like to use Gong as a precursor to Dan. In other words, to be able to start to build chi in the body, to be able to get internal sensitivity. But where they fall down is that they start building all this chi, they start doing all this work, and they don't do all the other stuff that's supposed to come with it. So they end up amplifying parts of themselves that they haven't dealt with that are usually not good, and it normally carries them down a bad road. And then Nedan is not an option for them because they've not worked on themselves, and the parts of themselves that need to be put out of the way are so big they're almost dominating who they are, so they can't do it. It's not that they would have to start again, basically, because they're just amplifying more and more of themselves. They're not doing the mental work that needs to come with Nedan in order to access those pre-heaven substances,
Interesting. Okay. Could you educate the audience on what in your definition, in very simple terms, what is pre-heaven chi?
Okay. Well, I mean, we have to talk about what the pre-heaven substances are, because it's not just one. There's pre-heaven, Jing, Qi, and Shen, and then it goes on a kind of a, it's almost like a step down where it goes Yuan, Shen, then you have pre-heaven Qi, then you have pre-heaven Jing, and then you have Jing, then you have Qi, then you have Shen, like that, like a loop, kind of from like a U shape almost, if you would. Pre-heaven chi is an interesting one because if you look at post-heaven chi and pre-heaven chi, there's a lot of different ways you could describe them. But the interesting thing about pre-heaven chi as opposed to post-heaven chi, and there's something quite interesting about it, and you can observe it if you pay close attention to the universe, you can actually observe this. Post-heaven chi, which is the one that's, after, we call after heaven chi or postnatal, it is distorted and it is very, 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 very unpatterned. So alchemically, that's demonstrated usually in charts as fire and water in the body. And you see the water down by the lower dantian, and you see the fire up in the heart. And what you normally see are these trigrams. So if you look at the trigram for water, what you normally see is the mixture of the broken lines and the straight lines. And then you also see the same in the heart, but they're reversed. There's a difference. So what they're basically saying is the yin and the yang are kind of intertwined, and you see it in the yin yang symbol as well. There's a dot in each one. There's a white dot in the black and a black dot in the white. And it's interesting that if you look at the Mopai, when John Chang talked about what was in his system, he spoke about the yin and the yang only being black and white. Because what he was referring to was that the yin and the yang were no longer polluted by the distortions in the fire and water. All right. Now, if you want to know the hierarchy from post-heaven to pre-heaven, it looks something like this in terms of chi. There is the fire and water chi that are post-heaven. And as you go back, you approach something called the Xuan Men, or the mysterious pass, or mysterious gate, or whatever you want to call it. And just as pre-heaven chi passes out through the Xuan Men, you have true yin and true yang. You have it is pre-heaven chi that is basically broken into two, but not yet distorted, if that makes sense. And then further back from that, you have Yuan Qi or pure pre-heaven Qi, which is not broken apart yet. That makes sense. So it goes through a kind of a process of, how would I say that, splitting apart and then becoming distorted. And of course, if you look in the environment, you'll see that the environment moves in cycles. Everything, the universe, everything moves because it's filled with pre-heaven Qi, and it moves like it has its own intelligence, right? But if you look at the way we behave in the post-heaven world, we're constantly distorted. We're constantly moved and changed by our mind. So what blocks us from accessing pre-heaven Qi? Our mind. And the process of Neidan is the destruction of the acquired mind in order to access to pre-heaven substances. That makes sense?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for explaining that. P, we talked off camera about, something you said just caught my attention. You said something along the lines of, like in our general understanding of chakras and dantians, that dantians are like, there's 3 of them, and then chakras, there's like 7 of them. Some people think it's front. Some people think chakras more in the back. Is there any misconceptions about chakras and dantians? I recall you saying something like chakras and dantians are actually in different dimensions. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
I can indeed. Yeah, it would be. There's a lot of misconceptions about chakras and what they are and how they work. But again, we have to go back to this idea I spoke of earlier about the jhanas, for example. When we talked about moving through the jhanas, we talked about moving through various subtle bodies. And the key point is that though those bodies are interrelated in the sense that they feed into each other because they're all part of one thing, they do exist on different levels of reality, if you want to call them that. And it is the case that the dantians and the chakras exist at different frequencies. So they're not on the same level. They're not in the front and the back. The dantians are part of the energetic body. The chakras are part of the spiritual body. And they do tether down into each other, but basically the idea is that, and this is going to probably annoy a lot of people and upset them, but I'm not here to make people happy. I'm here to be honest about these things and share the truth about them. You can't really jump over to the chakras. You have to do prior work first, because the gap is too far. And what's interesting is a lot of traditions that talk about chakras actually remove the mechanics that you need to go through in order to access them, because whether you go through the path of addition or the path of subtraction, it doesn't really matter. You are still kind of, how would I say, breaking down the barriers in order to, like, how would I say that? When you go through the path of addition or subtraction, you still have to go through something to get to those things. You can't just sit down and say, you know what, I'm going to focus on my chakra now and I'm going to open this chakra. It doesn't really work like that. The chakras are they're very, very subtle and they're very hard to reach and deal with. And it would be true to say that the more chi you have, the easier it will be to access them, but only by virtue of being able to absorb further back into these, bring your awareness further and further and further and further back. But if you've not done the mental work, you're not accessing the chakras, because ultimately they are like that. All that stuff stands in the way, all of it. There's like almost like a guardian of the gate, if you would, And
can I ask you something real quick?
Yeah.
So the Taoists and the Buddhists don't really deal with chakras, but the Hindus do, and the Hindus don't deal with the dantians. Is there a reason for that, in your opinion, or are they just is it just like a different way of going about things, or at a very high level, do they actually deal with both? Are they just why are there these two different energy centers, in your opinion, in different traditions? And also, what is it called? The Sephirite or something? In like the Western traditions, like it's more on the joints or whatever. Like why do traditions have different energy centers in your opinion?
Well, the thing is, they don't really like. This is really hard to explain because people, and I've heard people try to argue this about different things like Sufism and Hermetics and Taoism and Hinduism, and like it's not as clear cut as people think. The reality of the situation is that there is only one kind of physiology, if you would, of like we could call it etheric physiology. They're all the same. It's what you focus on and what you put the emphasis on that matters. Whether you're in a Sufi tradition, whether you're in a Taoist tradition, whether you're in a Hindu tradition, whether you're in a Buddhist tradition. I mean, I know several Buddhist traditions that all work with the Dantian. Several of them, not just one.
So, did you say that don't?
That do.
Oh, that do. Oh, that do.
I know other Hindu traditions that have the models of the Dantian.
Really?
I do.
Oh, interesting. So some Hindu traditions work with the Dantians
in a different way, though.
In a different way. Wow, that's interesting.
It's just not done in the same way. It's done in a slightly different way. That's all. That's the difference. But like esoteric physiology is strange. That's what I'll say. When you talk about the joints, for example, it's true that there are certain type of what you would kind of call energetic matrices on the joints and in various different places, and various different traditions focus on I know some that this is one called probably cause a star that talk about 72. I know other ones that talk about 108 as well. I know some that only focus on the 9 and the center of the body, on the spine, and then around that region as well. But I know some that focus on. Yeah, I probably shouldn't say much more, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is like, I mean, for example, like even the Sufi tradition, it focuses on certain regions around the heart, but those points are there, whether you're in a Sufi tradition or not. Whether you focus on them and whether you make that the emphasis of your practice is a different story. And what you do with them and how you work with them that's entirely different. That's true, but it doesn't mean that if you're not in a it doesn't mean that, for example, if you're not in a Hindu tradition that you don't have a chakra. Everyone has them. That's the part that people don't understand. Do you know what I mean? They think that these traditions are so different. No, they're not. They focus on different things, but the actual mechanics of how we are built as multi-dimensional beings are the same always.
There was a gentleman that came on my show a few weeks ago. He said that the 72 levels of Mopai are, is actually 9 or something like that. I know there's 9 stages in jhanas. Maybe that gentleman was referring to possibly something along those lines. And I mean, like, it sounds like maybe at the unseen level, where we can't see with our eyes in the spiritual realm, like these functions, maybe like you mentioned, like, the spiritual physiology is kind of difficult to see. Maybe that gentleman was referring to something like this, perhaps.
I wouldn't say he was referring to the jhanas. No, that wouldn't be true. But he was right about the connection between 9 and 72. That's true, that there is some traditions that focus on 9 major points along the center line of the body. They're generally split into 3 regions. So there's 3 focused in the lower region, 3 focused in the center region, and then 3 focused in the upper region, culminating outside the top of the head, not the body above it, culminating up there. And within that central line of 9, there's also another kind of 72 as well that are, I think, a lot of different traditions talk about 72, and they are referring to physical aspects of the body that do exist. By comparison, you have the other traditions that focus on 108. There are various Chan Buddhist traditions that focus on 108. There are various other Tantric Buddhist traditions that focus on 108. And there are Hindu traditions that have the marmas and things like that as well. So these things aren't, they're not as disconnected as people like to think they are. Basically, is what
Mm.
I could understand where he was coming, what he was trying to say, and what he was trying to talk about. Yes, that's definitely the case. That there is something to be said about this whole connection between 9 and 72. You know, my
Mm.
understanding of it's a bit more esoteric, and I can't really talk too much about. But what I will say is, I do know of one Western tradition that has that same model as well, of 9 specific points along the center line and 72 minor points that are almost kind of branched off it like a tree, if like the trunk of a tree, and if you want to call it kind of branches as well, branching off of it, you know.
Very interesting. Okay, okay. Let's go back to Nigong a little bit. And I want to, clarify a little bit more misconceptions from your perspective. Let's talk about microcosmic orbit or macrocosmic orbits. Are there any misconceptions, or in general, people have that right, in your opinion?
Yeah, there's quite a few. The microcosmic orb is probably the one we should talk about because it's the one that's most relevant to people's practice. The macrocosmic orbit is usually a bit beyond there. I'll briefly say something about it, but it's normally beyond what people are accustomed to, you know. But the microcosmic orbit, you see, one of the things that normally confuses people about it is there are stages to it, you know. And it was my understanding as well that it's not just a process, but in some parts of China, it's a whole tradition in and of itself. And you go through various stages, there's various stages to it. You know, it's not something that I follow a lot of, so I never delved too deep into what that whole tradition is. But I know enough about the MCO, and I've been through certain parts of it to know enough to understand the misconceptions that people have. The first one is normally that you can like, how would I say that? That if you're imagining chi going up your back and down your front, that's the microcosm. But no, it's not.
It's not really.
No, imagining chi going up your back and down your front is definitely not the microcosmic orbit. The microcosmic orbit, there are terms for these now. They're not at the top of my head, but basically, normally what ends up happening is there's an energetic aspect to it, which is a Neigong type aspect to it, and then there's a Neidan type aspect to it as well. And the Neigong type aspect to it is to basically open and widen the space to allow more chi to move through it. It's like, for want of a better word, it's like carving out a road. It would be a good way of putting it, like creating a road going up your back, up the back and down the front. And there's various, like, I mean, the practices I were taught to do that are actually quite, they're very physical, believe it or not. It's not really a mental, there is a bit of mental work involved in it, but where I found the most traction actually was these physical aspects that were brought to it, that were really, really, like, you literally feel the channel open in your back. It's not subtle at all. It's quite forceful, and it's quite a lot of pressure involved in it. And I was warned when I was doing it, it was quite dangerous actually, that if I didn't do it the right way, I could hurt myself. Once that channel, like that road, if you want to call it, is dug, then you get into the real, what we call the real microcosmic orbit, which is the alchemical microcosmic orbit. The alchemical microcosmic orbit has to do with basically when you do the foundation training in Neidan, what you have to do is consolidate Jing at the base of the body. So at the lower point, you literally get your Jing to become still. So Jing is, it vibrates and vibrates and vibrates and moves and disperses and does what it does through life. We try to get the Jing to still. And once the Jing stills, then it becomes more dense to the time to become. And what we try to do then is extract something out of the Jing, what they call the Jinghua. Or if you look at the trigrams and you see the water trigram, it's normally two broken lines with a straight line in the center, and you're trying to extract that straight line out the center. which is the yang within the yin. Once that spark is taken out, it's sent up the back, up into the brain, where it opens up certain centers in the brain. And once that process begins, a fluid starts to come out of the brain. And again, this is written about in several traditions as well: the wine of immortality, the amrita, the jade fluid, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. And then that starts to leak down into the mouth, and it's swallowed a certain way, and it goes back down, and there's a whole process that takes off from there as well. And that starts to physically change a person in a very major way. And again, the thing I will say is there are multiple physical signs that this is taking place, including teachers that will stick their finger in your mouth, take out the fluid, and taste it themselves just to make sure you have achieved it. So the thing about the MCO is there's no imagining it and there's no lying when it comes to it. You either have it or you don't.
Interesting. That kind of goes into my next question. Something you just said just caught my attention. So you know how, gentlemen like Mr. Chang would test students and see, how much chi is in the Dantian and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not mistaken, and I hope I'm not, misunderstanding what Mr. Rudy's doing, but I interviewed Rudy. Rudy's a fantastic teacher. Rudy was showing some type of video that I saw where he's able to measure how much chi is in the Dantian with some type of device. Yeah, like, so what I'm trying to, I guess, ask is is there any misconceptions perhaps about like chi and like electricity, maybe?
With chi and with electricity, yeah, there's a few. I suppose what I could say was the traditions that I was involved with before I changed to the Buddhist one, their way of checking how much chi you had built was twofold. Number one was they would literally push chi into your body, and there's a kind of a rebound effect where when the chi is extended into you, they can feel how much resistance there is, and that's a measure. That's what I believe. That's what John Chang used to do as well. It would go into the body, and based on how much resistance they would feel, that would let them know how much chi was in there. And the second one was that there was a test that you would do that I have seen done in public before on YouTube by a famous Neigong teacher. I don't really want to mention who he was, but you would have to be, this was not telekinesis, this was something else, that you would have to be able to physically change a material substance with chi. That wouldn't require a full Dantian, but it would require a certain amount of chi to be able to do it. So the test was that you would do this, and if you were able to successfully do it, the substance will be changed to a certain degree.
Very cool.
I can't really comment on people using devices, but what I can say is electricity and chi are not the same thing. That's I can guarantee that electricity and chi are not the same thing. Not at all.
So when people cultivate quote unquote chi with electricity, they're cultivating just electricity. They're not cultivating chi, in your opinion?
Well,
like,
I mean, you can look at it various ways, right? I know that there are schools that do use, for example, devices that do use various means that do manipulate electricity in order to open channels or in order to kind of do some basic type of healing. And it's at some degree, it can be useful in a way. Like I would say it has its place more so medically than anything else. We have to define what chi is in order to understand why they're not the same thing. Because what chi is basically is like, how would I say it, transformative potential. It has the potential for change. So that doesn't really sound like electricity, does it? You know? And you can tell because, like, there are other signs too. I mean, chi doesn't need a ground. That's something that people have radically misunderstood.
Could you elaborate on that a little bit? What do you mean by chi doesn't need a ground?
You don't need a ground for chi, as in, like, when people talk about being grounded in order to absorb chi, or need to be grounded when they're receiving an emission or something, that's not true. You know, that's never been true. And I've been witness to it firsthand. It does not need to happen. You know, electricity needs a ground, but chi does not. You know.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah. So whether you're trying to build chi, or whether you're getting a chi emission, or whatever it might be, that does not need a ground. It does not. You know, it simply doesn't. And I'm not. How would I say that? I'm not unfamiliar with schools that talk about it and ways it's been misunderstood as well. We could talk about that to a degree if you want to, but I do know that chi doesn't need a ground.
She doesn't need a ground. Interesting. Okay. One more thing about Nigong that's very popular. Well, yeah. That's a very popular concept. The Yi Jing Jing. To me, when I think of Yi Jing Jing, I think of like the Shaolin Qigong exercise or Qigong form. But you were telling me that Yi Jing Jing is something entirely different. Could you define what Yi Jing Jing is to the audience?
Yeah. Sure, no problem. Yi Jing Jing basically is what they refer to in the Buddhist tradition as the Tendon Changing Classic, if you would. Basically, it's a set of principles, not practices. That's kind of what's important. It's a set of principles that, when they're applied to practice in the correct way, transform the body and change it to a vehicle that is capable of cultivating chi to a very high level. All right, it starts to bring that whole process online of gets the Dantian going, start to fill the body with chi, and then eventually you get over into the marrow washing as well, which is the marrow washing classic is the step on from the Jing Jing, or they call it the Zishui Jing in China. There's one more after that as well that's not really talked about, but what I would say is the key point about the Yi Jing Jing is that though there are practices that are associated with it, it's whether the practice has those principles embedded within it or not that will dictate whether you'll actually go through the Yi Jing Jing process. That's what's really, that's what everybody misses about this, and I've only ever known, personally, I've only ever seen two people in public that I would say have a very good grasp on the principles of Yi Jing Jing. All of them, to the point that it's clear that they are rather adept in the Yi Jing Jing, And when you go through the process of the Yi Jing Jing, there are multiple physical signs that show up on your body. It's not subtle at all. Again, it's just something that you can, and people believe that, well, the culmination of Yi Jing Jing is chi emission. Fine. Okay, but chi emission can be faked. Some of those other signs cannot be faked. And one of those signs was talked about in the Magus of Java as well, I believe, where a certain individual spoke about how basically the way his body had changed was such that he wasn't being injured because of the chi in his body. If you recall that part of the Magus of Java, and that is something that happens. You build a type of an iron body, and the pressure of the chi pushing outwards acts like a protection as well, It changes all the white tissue in your body, Physiologically, there's multiple changes. Your skin changes. Your there's just a lot. There's a lot you go through. All your joints open in a certain way, and your whole body rewires basically.
Right. Could you tell me a little bit more about Nigong? I know many teachers use I don't know what they're called, but some type of pill they take, I heard, in order to emit chi. Are you familiar with that concept? I wanted to ask you, what to your knowledge, what are these pills? What's inside, and are they actually good for you? Is that something that you can take as much as you want, and does that make the body healthy, or is there like another different effect that it has? Like, can you speak on that possibly?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because various traditions use various different types of pills. Like, I mean, even in my own tradition, there are types of pills used that are a lot more esoteric than the ones I'm about to speak about. But I can talk about those for a little bit in a second if you want to. But to get to the chi pills, for example, there are substances inside them basically that some of them are known, some of them are a little bit less known. That what they cause the body to do is they cause the cells, if you want to put it that way, to kind of overproduce an abundance of chi to the point that the body can fill up rather quickly. And then that chi can be pushed out of the body and used for various means or whatever you want to put it. The problem with that is that it doesn't really work the same way as the cultivation method. And the reason why this has been, I'm not sure if I'm crossing the line talking about this now, so I'll try to be careful, but I'll say what I can. The reason why it has to do with when you go through the process of being able to build chi, like high level Neigong and whatnot, your cells go through a type of a change, basically, and how you produce energy changes. But the pills don't train you like that. Have you ever heard of a situation where when people do physical training, for example, and they push themselves too hard,
Mhm.
their muscles might be able to take it, but they might crack a bone or something like that. Something is not primed enough to take it. This is a similar thing that happens with these cheapos when you use them over and over again. They start to stress the cellular system in a really, really bad way because it's not been trained to build that excess of chi through proper methods. It's almost like a kind of a shortcut, if you would. And that does have ramifications long term, yes, as far as I've been told. To the best of
Um,
my knowledge.
P, I don't know if this is relevant or not. And I'm very, I'm not knowledgeable when it comes to the Nigong side of things a whole lot in Taoism in general. But isn't there something called there's Nigong, and isn't there the opposite of that is what Wei Dan? So Nigong is the inner cultivation, like Wei Dan, isn't that the outer cultivation? Isn't in Wei Dan like more doesn't that more have to do with like consuming elixirs and such? Am I right about that, or am I wrong?
There is a type of tradition that does go through building, in my opinion, and I am fairly sure on this, it's almost been lost in Taoism. However,
So Wei Dan has been lost in Taoism.
in my opinion, I mean, from any tradition I've ever been exposed to, it's been lost, and the it's very much alive in the Burmese traditions. And that's what I was talking about. The pills for alchemy that they use are not cheap pills. They're something very different. Like,
Really?
I'm really, really at the edge of what I can say when I say this now, but they involve things like the ingestion of mercury and other things as well. These are
Mercury.
these are not these are not simple like animal parts and herbs and things like that. There's a much higher level of refinement that is done to these substances at the level of Shen that purifies them in order for them to be able to be taken to fulfill that role. Because the truth is that in the tradition that I'm involved in, the internal and external alchemy, they're not separate.
So like Wei Dawn and like these elixirs, I mean, they are what it is, what they are. They're not like herbs that are healthy. They are literally for alchemy. They're not something that you can take to become healthier. Like it's like
That's not external alchemy. Alchemy is transmutation of substances. It is not using herbs to fix your body, and it is not using herbs to build chi in your body. It's something else.
wow.
I've seen.
This is,
I
I
could,
mean,
I could
you
show
are
you this.
you are sharing some like underground knowledge here, and
I'll
this
send you a picture of one of these pills later. I'll show you one of them. It's no problem. Like the substances like gold and mercury and various other
wow.
metals and other things as well. There are other substances involved too, but they're not what people think they are. It gets very strange. Trust me.
Wow, that is an eye opener, certainly. Since we're on, excuse me, since we're on the subject of, you know, cultivating qi and electricity and stuff like that, and we're talking about Nigong, obviously, my audience will be mad at me if I don't talk about Fa Qi. You shared last time that you had an incredible Fa Qi experience, but you also believe that Fa Qi is very dangerous. Obviously, it is because you're sending electricity. Well, electric Qi, I should say. Electric Qi out of your body. That can't be healthy for you. That can't be good for you. Could you explain to the audience why, in your opinion, doing Fa Qi is so dangerous? And also, could you share one more time your personal Fa Qi experience? One more time?
I mean, I could say a little bit about it in a moment. I will, but for a start, I suppose we better go through a couple of other things first, and I think we'll start with there are certain people that know various means of. Some of them use devices, example, to mimic Fa Qi, and then there are other ones that use pills, like we talked about, to boost their system to do Fa Qi. And it's not that it's not Fa. It is. They have Qi in a pushing it out of their body. That's what it is. And then there are another group of people that like to temporarily pool electricity in their body and emit that out of their body. And then there are others that what you call it? There are a few others that do what I would say would be the Fa Qi, as I understand it, to be the real thing.
Such as John Chang, right?
Mm-hmm. It is the real thing that is quite dangerous, because you have to understand what exactly is it you are pushing into somebody. You have to understand what it is that you're moving into somebody. It is a type of, I mean, the mechanic for it basically is like you are releasing something that is within inside your energy body, if you want to call it that. So you're opening a field of information and transferring it through from one person to the other. Like, why does Fa Qi help people? Well, because if it's real Qi, it's real transformative potential. Understand? So it can boost organs, it can clear blockages, it has a type of an intelligence, if you would. It's not electricity. Electricity can do things too. I'm not discounting that it can, and I know people that do legitimately do it, and it does help some people, and that's great, and all that. But where it gets dangerous is two places. The first one is that what are you sending to that person? And when you open that field, are they transmitting something back to you as well? Do you have the sensitivity to know what it is? Do you have the means to block anything if it comes true or not? Do you have that type of discernment? And it's been my experience that most people don't have that type of discernment at all whatsoever. The second side of it is that, and this is a bit more tricky, is that if you don't have that discernment, you probably don't have that level of sensitivity either yet. So if you don't have that level of sensitivity and you're pushing chi out of your body, do you know what it's actually doing to your body on the inside? Every time you do a fa chi, it takes a little bit of you away. That's a real thing. Like, and it's hard to get into the which, the what, and the why of that. But how long before you feel that? How much damage have you done to your organs before you feel that? You know, this is a very, very important thing, because for some people, they continually open energetic spaces and move energy. They have no idea what they're doing on the inside of themselves or others. They think they do, but in reality, they don't. And you hear about these stories all the time, these teachers dropping dead, and these people that have strokes and they have heart attacks and they have all these things happen. Why? Because they've drained themselves. You know, even I have recalled, it's always the same thing. They drain the cells and an organ goes, or they get cancer or something happens like that, because they've weakened their system over time. So my own experience of it was when I had an experience of Fa Chi, I did do some random testing to people when I developed this very, very weird internal pressure in my body and a kind of a current that I could feel. And I didn't know whether or not it was transferable to. I didn't know if I was imagining it or not at first. I mean, I was pretty sure I wasn't imagining it, but I'm a scientific guy. I'm a researcher. That's my job. So I'm like, I'll get these people and I'll test them and I'll try it on them. And I did. And when I did it, I took a series of people that were unknowns to each other, and I tested them in a different sequence. So I counterbalanced sequence. I like 1, 2, 3, 3, 2, 1, 2, 1, 3, or whatever. And I performed some phenomena on them. And some of those things were quite weird that happened. They had, like, you know, transfer of heat and empty force and electric shocks and whatnot. But what was even stranger to me was that, for one, I felt like I was going to die after it, because it was like I drained so much. It was like somebody just took the water out of a sponge and emptied it, basically. That's the best way I could describe it. But the other even stranger thing was I had started to develop the problem that they had manifested in me. Even ones I didn't necessarily know about. Like, someone had an issue with their cervical spine from an injury, and I started having pains in my cervical spine and my teeth and stuff like that I never had before. I was like, what damage am I after doing to myself, you know? And I asked my teachers about it later. They went absolutely nuts at me, and they're like, you don't have the sensitivity to know what you're doing. You're opening up an energetic space and you're transmitting energy, and energy can come and energy can go, and fine, you might have the level of absorption you need to build that amount of chi and do all this and do all that, but you don't know what you're doing. And you're like, what if somebody had cancer? You could have got it. You could have cancer now. You could be dead, Nicole. You could have just signed your own death warrant without even knowing it. You know, so this is where it becomes really, really dangerous, and people don't really get what they're messing with when they start to open up energetic fields. Like, even some of the tests that we were given when we're asked to build chi in the body, they're just done to demonstrate proficiency. Once you've demonstrated, that's it. They're not done anymore. They're not a party trick. They're not done to sell courses. They're not done to attract students. They're just done to attest to proficiency. That's it. You know, there are different cases where people have to use chi medicinally or therapeutically or whatever it might be in clinics. That's a different thing. But for a person that's studying Ne Gong or Ne Dan to try and move towards, you know, more subtle states of awareness and whatever, this stuff is just to show that, okay, you have this level of chi in your body. You built your Dantian, you have a specific amount of chi. That's it. And it's on to the next thing. But most people get stuck. And I couldn't understand why they get stuck, because it's interesting. It's cool. It's amazing. It seems beyond belief. It's not really beyond belief if you understand human physiology properly. But because we don't understand it and we've been conditioned into this materialistic world, it's like this supernatural thing to people. You know, it's not quite.
Interesting. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I mean, kind of go. I mean, so the Facci that generally people do, like Master Joe, Chris Fazio. There's various different Rudy, Mr. Andrea. There's various different characters that are known for doing Facci. All these individuals, to my knowledge, they typically focus on the lower energy centers, the lower Dantian, in order to emit Facci. But you're more. You were telling me that you're a fan of more of the upper energy traditions, and traditions that focus more on the upper energies, the Shem based practices. Am I correct on that? You're more of a fan of the Shem based practices, correct?
I mean, I was involved with the Longman Pai tradition, which is one that actually does both. So it works on the lower and the upper at the same time. It starts with more lower and a little bit of upper, and then as you go through the tradition, they meet in the middle, and then it swaps around, and it's less lower and more upper until eventually you get to the point where it just becomes all upper. That's kind of what happens with Longman Pai. You cultivate Jing and Ming at the same time, basically. And then once the alchemy is done, you start to move towards more subtle states, and again, like the other tradition we talked about, you're starting to get to the stage of immortal, you're on the way out, so you're in stages of spending animation for a long time. But what happened to me was I was involved with the Neigong and Neidan for a while, and I was having results that were a lot faster than most of my counterparts, and it got to the point where like one of my teachers said to me, like they were like, look, for you, it's like I mean, most of my counterparts were getting things like Zifa Gong or tremoring or shaking, or they might have the heat in the lower Dantian and the bubbling in the lower Dantian, and they might get the starts of like chi emission or like this like 20-30% stuff, with the lower. Whereas I was having some radically strange thing. I was getting those, but I was having stuff happening at the level of the soul and the spirit, the Hun, if you want to call it that, and the Shen. And at first, I thought it was just something that, chi is going onto the head or something like that. That was the first instance that everyone kind of thought it was. But these things progressed over a couple of years, and I got to the point where my teacher, okay, hold on a second, this is not that, this is something else. This person is going through things that he shouldn't be going through. He's progressing a lot faster than we thought he would. But one of my teachers said to me was like, it's like everyone around you is studying for a test and you've already got the answers. You that's the level, that's where you're at in terms of your ability to absorb into the energy body, your ability to access these aspects of Shen and stuff like that. And I have to be honest, I kind of felt in a way that I was kind of in trouble, because they were not guiding people through that. They were guiding people through something else. Do you understand? So I had to kind of look elsewhere, really. And I was already involved in another Buddhist tradition, and I just kind of realized, okay, if I can take this to a higher level, and I searched and I dug around and I found more teachers, and eventually I got involved in another line that works alchemically like Neidan, but instead of doing all that lower work, it has a very specific means of bypassing it. In other words, it doesn't need to be done, basically, Yeah, I mean, I can share 2 or 3 of my experiences with you if you want to.
Right. Yeah, please. I mean, like last time you shared about entering the white room, that was a fantastic story. Could you explain what that is to the audience? And could you?
Yeah, I'll explain that. I'll explain. I mean, I think I should explain what happened over a course of a couple of weeks, actually. That might be a bit better for people to understand. So, I mean, the first thing that happened to me, because they happened in succession, basically. The first thing that happened was, so in some Neigong schools, you have something called Shui Gong, which is sleeping Qigong or sleeping practice. You have various aspects of that in Long Min Pai, and you have various aspects of that in other traditions as well. And there's a series of stages that are involved in that. Now, in my school, most people were stuck on stage one. They couldn't even do it properly. And I had a lot of discussions with students about this. And it's not that they weren't talented or anything. It was just a very difficult practice. I was getting to stage 5 of this practice, and I hadn't even learned it. That they didn't teach it to me, but I was getting there, which is to be able to have conscious awareness of the Hun, which is the ethereal aspect of the soul that separates at nighttime from the physical body when you sleep and travels to various realms, if you want to call it that. And I started to be able to access that consciously very quickly. And I started to be able to have various conversations with various entities. And then I started to be able to perceive spirits. And that was a very, very mind-boggling experience, because I've been a very, very grounded person all my life, you know. And it kind of took a lot of people by surprise, like when I was able to access the Hun so easily, because that's not something you should be able to do. Like I said, sleeping Qigong has a series of practices that go with it. That's at the upper end. So I shouldn't have really been able to do that. But one of the reasons why was because prior to that, I was very, very sick. And I was sick for so long, I kept having out-of-body experiences while I was sick. And I was having it multiple times a day, and I was spending several hours in that state, because I was really according to my teacher, I was on the border between life and death for about 6 months. So when you spend that amount of time in that state, it's like your body registers it. You understand me? And you start to become accustomed to be able to feel it and sense it all the time. That was the first thing that happened. And then following that, I had another experience, what's known in Dan as white room makes empty, entering the white room, whichever you want to call it. That's wrote about in various Nedan texts. And it's a very strange experience, but it basically involves piercing the upper dantian in a certain way, where you become kind of engulfed in light, white, like everything just turns white, completely white. And when I came out of that state, I had opened an aspect of energetic vision that allowed me to see subtle bodies on people. And it was super, super strong. Like it was literally like 20/20 vision when I came out of that state for a while. I could see magnetism everywhere. It was literally everywhere I looked. And then over time, it became a little bit more distorted, and it became a process of training it then. And that's very important. That's very important for Nedan, because you have to have developed inner vision in order to be able to do Nedan at the higher levels. But that's a stage of actually piercing the upper dantian in a very specific way. And I went through that very early on. I shouldn't have went through it as fast as I did. And then the third experience that I had was a very unusual one that only my Buddhist teacher was able to explain to me properly, where I was in a specific place that is it's a very, very peaceful, relaxing place in nature. And I was with my partner at the time. And this is the thing that people don't always understand. These experiences and these breakthroughs that you have, or these realizations they don't always come on the cushion. Sometimes they come off the cushion too. And I was walking around with her, and all of a sudden it was like I just went out of my body. I didn't. I was still there, and I was walking around, but it was like I was in a different layer of reality for a while. And I started to see all these things around me, like fireflies just arising and passing everywhere I looked. I could see all this information just coming and going in, sparking in and out of reality. I was completely mesmerized by it, and I was absorbed. I was looking around me, and I was just everywhere I looked. No matter, I looked at myself, and I looked at, it was like everything was just arising and passing, arising and passing, arising and passing. And about 45 minutes later, I came out of that state. And my parents looked at me and said, "What the hell just happened to you?" And I said, "I don't know. I have no idea." I explained it to her. I was a bit shook after because I felt like I just went to another dimension or something like that. But when I spoke to my Buddhist teacher afterwards, they explained to me that I just had a shift basically, and I accessed kind of what they call I got a perception of what's called ultimate reality, if you want to call it that, or what's called the Rupa Kalapas, or the most fine, the tiniest particles that make up all of materiality. Basically, I kind of spent about 45 minutes absorbed in that state, and these things just kept happening over and over and over and over again, and other things as well that I don't really want to get into. Various things around people, ghosts, spirits, people dying, and being able to telepathically feel what people are feeling, and just a whole host of stuff kicked off. But the idea was that I was developing all these things, and this was not supposed to be happening to me. Like, it wasn't happening to anybody else. And it became uncomfortable to the point where I didn't want to talk about it anymore, and I didn't want to ask my teachers about it. So I just, you know what, I dug around and I kept going, kept pushing in the Buddhist tradition. Eventually, I found out, well, there's this whole other alchemical side of the Buddhist tradition that you don't know about, and now you're involved with this. So those types of cities and things like that open up in this tradition, they're a part of the path. So they're very well explained and understood what they are for.
Very cool. Yeah, thank you for explaining that. You really dropped some seriously underground knowledge today and golden nuggets. I mean, this type of information is so rare, and that is my goal on my channel, to, like, you know, try to find as much rare information as possible. But it's hard to find them. You know, like, rare information is rare for a reason, and they're rare for a reason. So, you know, my audiences will be freaking mad at me if I don't ask about Mopai. So I'd like to ask a little bit about Mopai, you know, because that's just what people love to talk about. You know, everybody, you know, is a big fan of John Ching, as he should be. He is, you know, a legend, and, you know, he's the person that's, you know, shared Nigong and, like, Qi work to the world and stuff. And you know, without him, like, you know, like, a lot of these things aren't going to be really available, aren't going to really be available to us. So he's a big contributor to that, no doubt. Without saying this individual's name, you're telling me that there's possibly a popular Nigong teacher that's possibly connected with Mopai?
Yeah, I know of at least one that is quite well connected to the Mopai. I do, and I think that I think that a lot of the information about the Mopai that came out was questionable. You know, that there was a lot of, like, ifs and buts, but what I can say is this idea that, like, they hate all Westerners and things like that. That's not quite true. You know. And I mean, there's people that I don't have to be uncomfortable talking about this because other people have spoken about it before too. It was known that there were certain Westerners that went after, you know,
Right. I mean, obviously, I interviewed Mr. Gamadian. You know,
yeah, but not just Gamadi, but I mean David Ferdesi, Ian Baker. There's been a load that have went to
right,
see
Mr. Baker, right.
Well, so I mean, but I would say that, and there's probably, you know, information about the Mopai that people get confused about. You know, I mean, for example, I would say that I don't think Westerners are hated. Like the evidence stands to counter on that. It doesn't stand to be true to me. I know a lot of people that have tried to continue that practice and stuff, and I'm not sure how ethical that is. Based on my knowledge of transmission and what happens at the level of transmission and what's needed at the level of transmission, it's not something I would. It's not something I would encourage anybody to do. Basically, there are certain. If you read carefully, because my tradition uses this stuff a lot. If you read carefully the Magus of Java, they talk about the Fu initiation and stuff like that. Where John takes a Fu and all those things. I mean, they're like bread and butter in some of what I do. Just there's talisman. You've seen some of them. They're for everything. That's not. There's forces that you don't understand that are involved with those things, and if you continue to mess with those forces, you might find that there might be problems on your plate.
Interesting. Okay. The Mopai is known as the Thunder Path. Am I correct on that? Or
some of them talk about it as the Thunder Path. Yeah, they do.
There's various different psychics over the years that say they got struck by thunder and stuff. I believe Mr. Mitchell talked about something along those lines as well. Mr. Daniel Mitchell said something, in a public video that I watched, something in regards to getting struck by thunder. Are you knowledgeable about that subject, and could you elaborate on that a little bit? I heard rumors like in certain traditions you have to be struck by thunder in order to advance to levels and things of that nature as well.
There's a lot of things that are involved around thunder, but what I will say is that there is legitimate thunder and lightning paths and things like that, and they do have a legitimacy, and there are various things I could talk about. I suppose we could start with the idea of being struck by lightning. There's been stories I've been told as well about people being literally struck with lightning. I'm not sure. I can't personally attest to like the weather hitting you with a bolt of lightning, and that's a thing. But there's a far more esoteric thing that I can't talk about. That is quite strange, and it has to do with a high level of practice around the level of Shen, and more specifically Ling. And there's a stage basically where there's like a manifestation. And this is what I said to you earlier about light manifest. I mean, you heard what Damo said in that interview about light manifesting, and this light appears around people, and it hits them with a type of a lightning. And we call it the striking of Ling, basically. So it's a sign of a certain level of attainment in alchemy, and it is visible to other people. It's not subtle, and it's quite clear. It's not fake, and it's not subtle, and it's very real. So there is an actual stage of process. There's another part of the thunder and lightning path, if you want to call it that, as well, where there are certain points opened up on the body in a very specific sequence, in a very specific shape, that attune the body to the frequency of lightning itself. That's another thing that takes place. And there are various traditions that involve opening up points in a very specific way in the body. This is actually one thing that I always talk to about people with Ne Gong and Ne Dan. It's one of the big differences. For example, when you build the Dantian in Ne Gong, it's just this gross field of magnetism that has to be reconsolidated, because it's lost at the early levels of life. Once you hit puberty and stuff like that, it doesn't go away and disappears, but it kind of disperses and becomes quite weak. You've got to pull it back in and strengthen it all over again and make it dense. But in Nedan, you've got this thing we call the Dantian, we call the cauldron as well. It's not the same. It's different. It involves connecting points down there in very specific ways. And there's a few of them. It's not just one or 2 points. There's a few. And when those points are hooked up and connected in a specific way, it creates the conditions for the elixirs to be compounded when they go down there. So this is one of the ways I know that a lot of people that talk about doing Neidan, what they don't, when they're actually not doing it, because they don't understand these concepts of how to build the alchemical lord on the end. There are points that need to, and the thing is, those points are energetically connected, so they start to compound the elixir in very specific ways, and you'd have to know about them. And then there's also this other idea about the whole story of there's a kind of an esoteric side of Lei Gong and Jianmu, or the thunder and lightning. The thunder deity is Lei Gong, and the wife would be Jianmu, and it's got to do with this idea of reversing perception and using the light of awareness to burn out karma. All that deity stuff is like a metaphor for that type of practice, basically. There's a lot to it. I'd say.
Right. Yeah, thank you for sharing all that stuff. I do want to talk a lot about Mopai, but there's only so much limited information, out, and like so many people have regurgitated the same information over and over and over again. So as much as I want to talk about it, it just comes down to speculation. And I feel like if I start speculating on stuff, it just creates false rumors. So, I don't want to do that, which I will say this. I feel like there is unfortunately a lot of that, which as they should be, because we're all speculating. We want to know more and more and more about it, and that's how, unfortunately, rumors, because one person says possibly this is something, and all of a sudden that becomes like a fact, and I've seen that happen because I've, with certain things in this industry. And so I don't really want to do that. I certainly don't want to contribute to something like that. So, but I do want to, with that being said, though, I do want to ask one thing. Not going to say their names, but there are, we talked about this off record. Once again, I'm going to emphasize, I'm not going to say their names, but there are obviously well-known Nigong teachers out there that are out there. They're just out there. And there's only a few on the internet. Few of them, you believe are very, very high level. And you believe that one individual in particular, his teacher is extremely high level. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to give any more hints away, but you know who I'm talking about. Could you talk about this one individual? Actually, just could you talk about them? You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's my opinion that they work. A lot of the work that they do is primarily at the level of spirit. So it's high level stuff. And if you were to pay attention to what I said earlier about what happens people when they're in the vicinity of those that radiate a very, very certain type, a very, very strong, specific type of Shen from their body, you go through cataclysmic changes around those people just by virtue of being in their field, and there are ways of doing certain types of chi emission where you can alter the fields around a room or where you can tune your field and it can be mimicked in the room. Basically, that's a kind of a type of chi emission that's used often. But the purity of Shen can bring other things too. Basically, it can also bring your awareness to the light of Shen as well, and it can spawn. I've known of things that happen. People's microcosm orbits have spontaneously started to open up. The channels have been dug for them and stuff like that. So you're talking about a very, very, very high level of practice. Now you're talking about someone that is beyond standing there and pushing chi in someone by hutting and pursing their lower abdomen shut. This is a much higher level of practice, basically, because they've been through these alchemical changes. Their body is transmuted. That's the best way I can put it. Their cells have been transmuted. If you think about what filling the body with chi is, you're filling the body with transformation potential. So it is this specific individual has been through those changes a long time ago. So you're talking about someone that can take you very, very far.
Yes, certainly. And all I can say is there's some public people out there that are just, you know, like we're not talking Fauci, like there are just levels and levels
Yeah,
of Fauci
it's
tier. You're not that's I think I'm gonna stop there, and that's all I'm gonna say because you know, like it's so up to speculation, obviously, and but like underground people like you are aware. Like for instance, you told me about a story of a guy who can like push people and like stuck into a tree and stuff. I'm gonna end there, like not gonna spread any more rumors, but there's just levels above this Fauci stuff, and there are some powerful people out there, and they are working at that Shen level. So yeah, very
I mean,
very powerful.
yeah. One thing is, I will say that I find that people people with this is going to sound, I don't mean to sound kind of elitist when I say this, but people with the right level of perception can see it. Like it's visible because people don't get this, but your energy body and your mental field, they all have a structure to them, and they're shaped and patterned in very specific ways naturally. It is the mind that unnaturally patterns them. So for somebody that doesn't have a level of energetic development, for example, any sensitivity or any etheric vision or anything like that, they look at a person as a potential teacher and they say, "Oh, this person can emit chi," or "Oh, this person knows about this," or whatever it might be, and that's fine. But you don't really understand what you're seeing fully, and it's going to be a really long time before you do understand it. But for those with the eyes to see, they don't need to watch what these people are doing. All they need to do is look at them, and they can see
Wow. Um.
very clearly
Um.
the leakages. You can see the distortions. You can see all those things.
Right. Right. You mentioned certain characters that are amongst my friends that you said like this guy has leakages and stuff. I'm not gonna obviously say who they are, but um. Yes, certainly. P. So there's like we talked about misconceptions and who's high level and things like that a lot on this call. My hope is that hopefully a lot of high level people are watching this, but I know for a fact there are people that are just embarking on this journey that are just going, what are they even talking about? I know there's a lot of people like that, amongst my viewers. Um, for instance, when you're telling me off, line, like you're saying, you know, like, people say Kundalini awakening, and you said that, oh God, what a joke. Like, there's only a handful of people that attained Kundalini awakening.
Yeah,
And things like that. I mean, like, yeah, actually, can you talk about that real quick just before we wrap up?
yeah,
Kundalini, only a handful of people have attained Kundalini awakening.
yeah. I mean, yeah, because a lot of this has been about misconceptions. So I think we can definitely talk about Kundalini. That's one of the biggest ones. Jhana is a big one. Chakra is a big one. Kundalini is a big one, and grounding is another one. I think I'll talk about Kundalini and grounding for a second, and I'll explain a bit more about those things. All right. Start with Kundalini anyway, because that's a huge one. I mean, you have to understand that Kundalini is at the level of the spirit body. Like it's high, you're talking about level working with the chakras, and you're talking about opening the chakras. Heat traveling up your back into your head is not Kundalini. I'm sorry, and I'm going to be really blunt. I really don't mean to be dogmatic about this, but that is not Kundalini. The best way to describe this to people is like, you know, when you play a video game, you have to beat one level to get to the next. Kundalini is like the last level.
Oh, wow.
Like when the Kundalini is awakened, it goes up and it comes down and it opens the chakras. But there's a whole process you have to even go through before that as well, of contacting the bindus and the red bindu and the white. There's a whole, like, it's almost like it's pretty much like a Nedan type. It's a type of alchemy really. Like, I mean, you have to fuse certain things, send them down, start a type of a fire. These are all metaphors, of course, but they're talking about very specific processes you have to go through in order to even stir the Kundalini. Just touching the substances, to even touch the Kundalini, require you to be able to access types of pre-heaven states. So you think you had a Kundalini awakening in a yoga class? No, I'm sorry, you didn't. Or because you manipulated your breath? No. When the Kundalini travels up and travels back down, it burns open the chakras. It lights up the nervous system in the body and basically takes the human as far as they can go. Like it's pretty much the end of the path. There are only 2 or 3 people that have done this, like on the planet at any given moment. Like it's that high level. It's just super, super, super high level. And if you read the classics and the way they're wrote, and they talk about all the things that come with it. I mean, I can tell you this much. I can tell you this for a fact. I've read the Buddhist texts and I've read the Taoist texts. I'm not involved in the Hindu traditions, but I do know about the Kundalini because it's not just in Hinduism. It's wrote about in other traditions, even though it's not the same name. It's in other traditions as well. All those cities that they write about in the Buddhist canon, all true. All those cities they write about in the Taoist traditions, true. So what about all the cities that come with the Kundalini? You've had the awakening. Where are the cities? They're not there because you didn't have a Kundalini awakening. What you had was you released a pocket of latent energy, like what they call Udana Prana, at the base of the spine. It went up, shot into your head, and you saw some colors. That's normally what happens when people are doing yogic work, or you release some latent yang chi in the body, goes up into your head, lights up your spine, you get overheated, you start to see vision, you start to hear voices because there's more energy in your head than there normally is, and that's what you're normally experiencing. You didn't have a Kundalini awakening, because if you did, you wouldn't be human anymore. We'd be basically almost practically like mortal, for want of a better word.
Wow.
So, I mean, like let's be realistic about it. You know, I know that that's going to sound harsh to people, but I don't mean to sound harsh. I'm saying these things so that you don't get misled. You know,
when I brought Rudy on, and Rudy said that even someone as high level as Master Zhang, and he was nowhere near the rainbow body.
I mean, you see videos of him doing all sorts of amazing things on video, and there's your answer. You know.
Right. I mean, for someone that is a Meyer and like knowledgeable and established like Rudy to say that, it was like a big eye opener to me, where I go, wow, I'm for sure not going to attain it then, which I don't care. I mean, I'm not like attached to that anyways, but it was a big eye opener. Like, what? Like, I thought Master Jane was like, for sure close to that, if not attained it. Like, that was my limited thinking. But when I found that out, I was like, wow, that's an eye opener, and just made me. But I will say this, though, like, it made me realize. It just made me realize just how limited my knowledge is. But more importantly, just made me just really humble me to understand, like, this is some serious stuff. Like, this is some serious stuff. And
yeah,
I mean, guys such as yourself, you came on here and you were gracious enough to share all this underground information today. I'm super grateful for that. But really, I mean, it just comes down to, I mean, this is some serious work, and this is some serious devotion involved in this. And alchemy is no joke, and that's just what I'm learning from you guys right now. So
yeah, I mean, I mean, alchemy is basically, for want of a better word, like, because Neigong is used for several different things. People can use it for healing, and people can use it for martial arts purposes. But Neidan's only really used for one thing, and that's, you're moving from the stage of enlightenment to immortality. That's what alchemy really is. If you want to get down to it, that's exactly what alchemy is. It's only one thing, So it also becomes quite dangerous as well. And I should probably talk about this as well. I did say I would say something about um, grounding and yin and yang chi as well. I think I should say something about that to help people. I think it's important.
Yeah. Could you cover if there are any misconceptions in your opinion about yin and yang chi? Please share.
Yeah, I think it's important because I would like people to go back to what I said earlier about the idea between this distorted version of chi and this less distorted version that's just prior to yin and yang splitting out from pre-heaven chi. I want to talk about that for a moment. And I'm aware that people might not want to listen to me, but I'm going to direct you back to the Magos of Java first, because I know people take that book seriously. Now, I have my own opinions on that book. I think there's truth and there's some kind of misunderstanding. There's a whole bunch of things inside. And I'm not going to sit here and take it apart piece by piece. I think it's a great thing. It opened up the world of Neigong and internal work to people. But I want people to go back to what John said specifically about meditation. John said it's about being on the borderline between waking and sleep and life and death. You're not here, you're not there. What he's talking about is approaching the Xuan Men. Okay? Now, if you understand what happens yin and yang chi when you approach the Xuan Men, when you're cultivating yin and yang chi, when you're in the here and the now and the meat suit and the this and the that, what are you really doing? You are cultivating this fire and water chi because your mind is still in that state. When you bring your mind closer and 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 closer to the subtle chi, to the really, 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 really fine, you're trying to get to the place where pure yin and pure yang chi are. It's true yin and true yang. These kind of like heaven and earth. Heaven and earth chi would be a better way of saying it. Heaven and earth chi would be a good way of putting it. Let's call it that. All right, because if I call it true yin, I'm going to confuse it with alchemy. So let's call it heaven and earth chi. So if you look at the trigrams for fire and water, all right, the water trigram, which is the distorted version of yin chi, is two broken lines and one straight line. The fire chi is two straight lines with a broken yin line in the middle. But what about heaven and earth chi? What heaven and earth chi is, heaven chi is three straight lines and earth chi is three broken lines. Now, if you take what I said earlier about the mind being that which distorts it, and you take what John said about getting to a state where there's no thoughts, where you're between being awake and being asleep, you're in meditation proper, basically. And he speaks about that. And you also take what I said about certain types of chi being patterned, like the chi in the universe, like the heaven chi and the earth chi. It's not that you are pulling in chi from the sky or that you are absorbing chi from the earth. It's not like that. What's happening is you brought your mind to a state where you can resonate with those frequencies. So that's what you're cultivating now. So you don't need to be stuck to the ground or have your head in the sky or anything like that. That's not how it works. It's about the state that you can access. John actually gave those keys to people if you know how to read it, if you know what he's trying to actually get at. He's saying it right there. And if you've ever been in a state like that, you'll understand your body just becomes radiant with chi. It just flies into you, basically. Like you just feel it building. But the chi is built inside the body, not outside. It's built within the cells, and it's where you are at your level of cultivation that dictates what you're building and how you're building it, and then how it can be used later on and stuff like that. So for Neigong purposes, I would say, if you're talking about cultivating the chi of the heaven or the chi of the earth, it's more about your mind. It's not about whether you're sitting on something that's plastic or not. I think this is a big misconception that people make.
P, with all this incredible knowledge that you have, I mean, you could easily charge hundreds of dollars and be a teacher easily with the knowledge that you have. I mean, like, you are very advanced compared to many spiritual teachers out there, obviously. And, you know, you may not be at the level of like certain characters that I spoke about, like, you know, that are very, very high level, like they're on another level playing field, but you are high level. Like, but you are not intended to be a teacher. Like, you are one of these guys, you know, the underground guys that are rare, that will never openly share stuff like this in the public. You're the serious cultivator. You are the serious cultivator that's, you know, underground, that's always training, and, you know, you're always training, and you know, it's just been it's just I was talking to a Nigong person, very respected in the underground world, and he was telling me, like, man, Ken, if you had 100 P's on your channel, your show will be like legendary. It'll be priceless, you know. And I feel that my audience will say the same thing too. Like, you know, I wish I knew 100 guys like you.
You're very kind. Thank you very much. I don't plan on being a teacher ever, to be honest with you. It's not something I want to do. There's a type of a karmic weight that comes with that, to be honest with you. And I mean, we're normally obliged to help within the tradition itself. That's one way of putting it. Like, but for me, I'm happy to just share anything freely with people that I've learned up to what I'm allowed to talk about. Basically, you know, there's a line where I can't cross, and I'm happy to give that information for free. And I probably imagine that someone might write some of this down and try to sell it later if they want to. I mean, that's fine. I don't really mind. It doesn't bother me. But I mean, I'm happy to just give information freely. I mean, I wish I had someone tell me some of those things when I started out. You know, I did meet someone quite, you know, after about a year or two, that was very, very helpful and pushed me in the right direction and gave me introductions and hints about where I might find certain people and where I might go and what I might encounter and how to avoid the pitfalls and what to look for, where to look for it, and what not to be trapped by. So I was always very grateful for that. And that's always the type of things I like to share with other people as well, you know. Ultimately, it depends on what you want out of it. You know, I mean, if you want to develop cities and you want to do all these telekinesis or Fachis, that's fine. That's your business. I'm not going to tell you what to do. You know, I personally don't think it's a very fruitful. Maybe not fruitful. Not the right word. I'm not sure it's the best use of your time, but that's your time. It's not mine. You know, it's whatever you want to do with it. I think that if people could see what was at the higher level of practice, they would probably not be as interested in that, you know?
Yeah.
I'm very, very, very firm about it. I have seen people and I've heard people say the minute they've been introduced to Shen-based stuff, it's like their mind just drops it like a potato, a hot potato or something like that, you know?
Right. I mean, and you know, I've been in this industry long enough to know I'm now by no means a high level guy, but like, one thing I can say is this, you know, like I know guys that started out showing off telekinesis and stuff, and they disappear. They disappear for a reason, because they kind of like what we talked about, you know, like they understand like there's just something bigger than that, you know. And that's something I noticed too about various characters, and that disappeared, and you know, some get lost too. That's a whole nother story, but yeah, I mean, you know, and like I said, that's just, and that's not just telekinesis. Like, even some people that are started out teaching like high level chi work and stuff, they eventually just kind of disappear, or they just want to, you know, they start teaching in a very small circle with like very underground people and stuff. I've seen that as well in various teachers as well, and they don't want to be talked about, you know.
No.
Yeah, and you know, and when it comes to money, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, P, but like John Chang didn't charge, or John Chang just taught it to people that were the right people. Am I correct on that?
Yeah, you did. Like,
I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your tradition is the same, works in the same way. Like they just teach it to the right people.
Forbidden to be for money exchange is forbidden.
Wow. I mean, that really is a big eye opener. Like at the highest level, you know, like money exchange is forbidden, and you know, I mean, I will say this. Like, I mean, there's two teachers. I'm not going to say their names, but like there's two teachers that charge high amounts of money, but you endorse them. I don't want to say their names, you know, because to respect their privacy, but like not there. There's nothing wrong in your opinion about charging lots of money, right? But the real underground stuff that's high level, they're not even charging money, or if they're asking for anything, it's very little.
I mean, how would I say it? I know one high level teacher that charges quite a lot of money.
Right.
Taoist teacher.
Right.
What I would say is, by the time you take everything into account that's paid for, it's not as much as it seems to be. But for me personally, it's just been a case. I've seen people teach like that have been like super high level advanced that have never asked a penny, you know. I think it's at everyone's discretion. Whatever their soul, whatever their spirit tells them to do is what they want to do. I would never try to impress my morals upon people or tell them how to behave or what to do or even what to believe. I mean, there's people that will listen to this and probably go, "This one doesn't know what he's talking about." Okay, fine, no problem. That's your opinion. I don't mind. It doesn't bother me. It doesn't change my practice. It doesn't change my experience. It doesn't change what I've seen or where I've been or what I've had happen to me or any developments I've had. It changes none of it. So it's fine if you don't want to believe me or you don't want to take my advice or you don't want to listen to what I have to say. I'm totally fine with that. You know?
Right. I mean, my for my audience, you know, there's two types of people such as yourself who are very much indulged in the spiritual cultivation practice, and you guys are so serious about it, like this is your life, you know, and monk mode, I like to call it. I respect that, and that's amazing, you know. And there's like the Alex Stefan type who's just going the totally different route, you know. He's pursuing success in life, and you know, he's all about empowerment. I think that's beautiful too. I really do. I think either route is beautiful, and it's up to whatever you want to do, and you know, whatever you resonate with. You know, if you, I would say the majority of my audience is probably split into these two categories, and that's the beauty of my channel. I guess you can choose which type of audiences you resonate with, and you know, like,
yeah,
there's probably no right or wrong answer, really. But I will say, but with that being said, though, from my direct experience, I will say this: if you are serious about being a cultivator, if you're serious about pursuing the Shen-based practices, Neidan, and like high levels of Nigong, you know, you have to be very devoted to this, and that it probably comes with a price. Like you got to sacrifice a lot, and so if you want to go down this route, you know, I'm probably not. I'm a podcaster. I'm doing various different things in life. I'm not as dedicated as guys like P and others, but it is a serious thing, and that's, I guess we can end at that. So
yeah, we talked about that. I think I told you like some of the things that I've had to like not do or not be allowed to do or would have trouble doing. Like I mean, like stuff like going into a bar is just a no for me. Like I mean, I've explained to you the mechanics of why. I don't get into it now and stuff like that.
Well, no, you certainly could. And we can end at that. That could be the last thing. So for someone such as yourself, who is a very high level, I know you don't call yourself very high level, but for someone such as yourself who is indulged pursuing this very high level practice, you can't go into bars. I mean, you can't even show your face really to the public, even online. You know,
well,
I mean, like, but that's a whole nother issue. But like, you know, why can't you go in the bars?
Well, the idea is basically that there are various places around that, like the Taoists call it Qin Chang, or energy fields, you know. So it's how the environmental space is attuned by the people within it. And when you go to certain places like bars or even certain religious sites and things like that, a lot of it depends on how the energy fields are attuned, you know. Bars are a very tricky place because people are indulged in alcohol quite a bit, and that has a very specific effect on the energetic layers of the body. So anyone that's had alcohol before, they probably know that it mobilizes chi in the body. There's a couple of other things too that are less spoken about, like making the energy bodies a little less how would I say that? A little less tight, if you want to call them that, a bit more loosened. And of course, as people leak out chi and leak out emotions and leak out all those things, there's two things that occur. One of them is that spirits like to pool around those places, and they like to feed off of it, and they like to kind of be in those areas. So there's a bigger chance of things like possession and whatnot there in those locations. But the other side of it is, for someone like me who's a serious practitioner, that's very, very sensitive to subtle fields of energy. Not only can I feel what's going on there, but I can feel what's happening with people in the environment as well. So if someone comes within my vicinity, I immediately pick up on their nervous system and what's happening to them. And like, for example, a lot of people, and I don't really talk about this, I don't like to talk about it, but I think it's fair. If I'm going to explain, I explain it properly. Like, I've helped a lot of people's injuries and healed them by being able to, when they come close to me, being able to feel what they're feeling inside their body, where they're feeling it, where the blockages are, where this is, where that is, and then I've been able to help them clear them. So when you go into a space that's rife with emotions, rife with things like anger, sexual lust, and whatnot, you become exposed to all those things. And they start to, as your energetic field is kind of embedded within that larger field, it starts to influence you too, you know. And a large part of my practice has been stilling and consolidating and eradicating all those lower forms of say interactions and whatnot, you know, and not just interactions, but physiological responses in the body as well. I'm a very calm person. I don't respond the way people normally do. So putting myself in that position would be like undoing work, if that makes sense. You know, it will get to a certain point where I will be asked to make a choice whether I want to stay in society or not at all. And I would have to make a decision at that point as well, whether I want to go into a full-time permanent retreat or whether I would want to stay in the world. You know, if I wanted to stay in the world, there would be a slightly different route that I would have to go, and would probably put a cap on my practice. Whereas if I wanted to completely retreat, that would open up a different set of kind of practices and ways and routes about doing things, you know. So that's probably the big thing that I would say is the issue around bars and stuff like that, you know. And I would say that you do have to, if you do want to pursue those types of practices, you do really have to, like, you have to be willing to have a very, very boring life at times. You have to be willing to have a very I wouldn't call it boring, but what I mean by boring from an outsider's perspective, you know, like they would find, what do you mean? You don't want to go out, you don't want to do this, you don't want to do that, you want to sit all day, you don't want to watch TV, you don't want to. Yeah, unfortunately, that's kind of some of the things you have to do if you want to get your jing and you want to bypass all those lower things. You have to retrain your senses and you have to retrain your mind and you have to undo all those things. So it does come with a lot of sacrifice. But if you are the type of person that can do it, like the progress is actually a lot faster in my opinion, because the chi, and the reason why it's faster, I'll actually explain that. The reason why it's faster is because if you build chi but you don't break down the self before you build the chi, you build up more of the self. It makes it harder to break the self down. If you break the self down, the chi will come faster and it will build faster as well.
Well
Oh,
said. Okay. Well, normally I tell people, guys, check out so and so's link, but this guy's an underground person. No social media, no schools, nothing endorsed. Blank, aside from like my links, in the description. So, with that being said, guys, Mr. P is willing to answer audience's questions, so we could potentially do a part 2 if there are enough questions in the comments. Eventually, I don't know when it's going to be, maybe months down the line or something like that. We could do a part 2 where we answer audience's questions. So, if you have audience, if the audience has any questions for Mr. P, who is an underground practitioner. Unfortunately, if you're a newbie and if you're asking questions like, is Reiki good or something like that? I mean, we're not going to answer something like that. I was but keep it obviously somewhat advanced and somewhat, worthy of answering, obviously. But Mr. P has agreed to do a part 2 if there are enough questions in the comments section. So yeah, that is the deal, guys. So yeah, feel free to leave comments for Mr. P. And with that being said, don't hesitate if you're a newbie. I mean, ask whatever you want to ask. I'm just saying, if it's something that's too basic, it might just be like, yeah, don't do Reiki or something like that. But I'm just saying, yeah, I mean, he is willing to come back one more time. So
yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions. I mean, I think it will be good for your audience to have a bit of interaction as well. So I'm happy to answer their questions. I mean, we could probably elaborate and expand on a few of them as well if we wanted to, So there could be something very interesting there. I think it will be definitely something fruitful. And
yeah.
Thank you very much for having me back on. It's a pleasure as always. I think that your channel is growing. You're getting more followers. Everything is looking great for you. I know you told me in private about some more people that contacted you that were very interesting as well. So I would say to people, please give Ken's channel a share because he's doing something he's not charging people money for the content. He's not doing anything. He's literally just doing his best to bring people that are knowledgeable, that are skillful, that have expertise, and that can guide people that are, watching his channel. So please share his videos all over social media and give him the boost he deserves, because people share an awful lot of stuff that shouldn't be shared. So please give this a share and please give his other videos a share as well. And hopefully it'll help his channel grow more as well. And we'll get more content out to you too. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much, Pete.
You're very welcome.